Let's jump right into this explainer. Are you feeling, well, kind of stuck in the endless, repeating routine of modern life? Maybe a sudden life shift or just a heavy bout of burnout has left you looking around and asking, what is the actual point of all this? If you are, I want you to know you absolutely aren't crazy. You've just bumped into something philosophers have been talking about for decades. Today we're exploring some incredible perspectives from YouTuber Ben Thomas, also known as Sisyphus55. We're going to see how his modern take on some very ancient philosophy can actually help us flip that existential dread into absolute liberation.
So, to figure out how we even get to this feeling of dread, we've got to look at the basic mechanics of our daily lives. If I were to ask you right now, why do you go to work? You'd probably say, well, to make money, to buy things, to pay the rent, to survive. And hey, that makes perfect sense. But let's follow this chain of whys just a little bit further down the rabbit hole.
If you go to work to make money to buy things, why do you want to be successful and buy those things in the first place? Is it to find love? Is it just to be happy? Or maybe to feel secure about your place in this massive, hyper-competitive society where, let's be honest, everyone is kind of pretending they know what they're doing? We string these whys together every single day to justify our routines, building this massive, towering ladder of meaning.
But eventually, you reach the top of that ladder. When you completely strip away the daily routines, the alarm clocks, the promotions, and you look up and ask the cosmos what the absolute point of it all is, why any of this is actually happening, you're met with absolute, terrifying silence. The universe, it turns out, just doesn't care.
And this perfectly captures what the 20th century philosopher Albert Camus called the absurd. It's this massive, undeniable tension between two opposing forces. On one side, you have us, our desperate, deeply human search for truth, reason, and meaning. And on the exact opposite side, you have a universe that flat out refuses to answer. It just remains totally silent and indifferent to what we want.
You see, we naturally try to make sense of things. We're pattern-seeking creatures, right? We want the world to be this reasonable place where good things happen to good people. But discovering that reality is actually chaotic, unpredictable, and entirely indifferent, that can feel like a devastating disruption to our lives. The moment that illusion of stability shatters, that is when the absurd is born.
Part 1. The 3 false solutions to escaping the absurd.
So how do we actually cope with this dread once we see it? Well, when the universe won't give us an answer, humanity tends to panic. Camus outlines 3 false solutions, basically defense mechanisms that we've historically used to deal with this incredibly uncomfortable tension. We try total denial, pretending the world makes perfect sense. We surrender our reason completely for a blind leap of faith. Or we succumb to ultimate despair and self-obliteration. But, as you'll see, none of these actually set us free. In fact, they just trap us even more.
It's kind of fascinating how we invent these totalizing systems to hide from the void. We obsess over retirement plans or strict dogmas just to distract ourselves from life's wild unpredictability. As Ben Thomas frequently points out, we also completely lose ourselves in the digital attention economy just to numb out. We tell ourselves, if I just save enough money, the universe will make sense. But valuing financial security just distracts us from the fact that we'll be financially secure in a world that still makes zero sense. It's a complete illusion.
Then, on the extreme end, some choose to escape the absurd through self-obliteration or just giving up entirely. But Camus fiercely argues against this. He famously wrote that judging whether life is or is not worth living amounts to answering the fundamental question of philosophy. He says that choosing to give up is essentially confessing that life is simply too much for you to understand, and that is the ultimate rejection of your own freedom. You're basically letting the indifferent universe win.
Part 2. Sisyphus, the absurd hero, and revolting with joy.
Instead of escaping through denial, false hopes, or giving up, Camus introduces us to a completely different way to live, embodied by the ultimate rebel, Sisyphus. Now, if you don't know the myth, Sisyphus was condemned by the gods to an eternity of pushing a massive boulder up a mountain. And every single time he reaches the top, the boulder inevitably rolls all the way back down to the bottom. He is trapped in a task of absolute futility. Camus uses this to represent our modern human condition, the daily grind, the 9 to 5, the apparent meaninglessness of our own repetitive routines.
But here is the absolutely crucial point. Sisyphus doesn't hope for a better tomorrow. He doesn't pray for the gods to take the boulder away. He embraces the absurdity of his situation with total clarity. He knows it's meaningless, but he pushes anyway. As Camus so beautifully puts it, the struggle itself towards the heights is enough to fill a man's heart. One must imagine Sisyphus happy. By finding real joy in the present struggle, he actually becomes the master of his own fate. Sisyphus is what Camus calls the absurd hero. He lives in a state of permanent revolt. He literally scorns the gods by enjoying his punishment. And this shows us a really profound truth. Accepting absolute hopelessness and completely letting go of the need for the universe to hand you a grand purpose is actually the key to absolute untethered freedom. You are finally free to just live.
Part 3. Finding the Invincible Summer Through Stoicism and Absurdism.
Dealing with the absurd isn't just about pushing boulders, though. It's heavily about your internal world. Ancient Stoics, like Epictetus, absolutely understood the assignment here. They realized that while we cannot control the external chaos, we can't control the indifferent universe, we can't stop economic recessions, and we for sure can't stop that boulder from rolling back down the hill, our internal world and our reactions to those events are entirely our own. We have absolute authority over our internal response. This profound insight is captured perfectly by the psychologist Viktor Frankl. He wrote, "Everything can be taken from a man but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances." Even after surviving unimaginable horrors, Frankl realized that you maintain total internal sovereignty, even in a meaningless, chaotic desert. The world can take literally everything from you, but it cannot take your choice of how you respond.
Which brings us right back to Camus, who wrote this incredible line, "In the depth of winter, I finally learned that within me there lay an invincible summer." This beautiful paradox means that even when the universe is cold, dark, and utterly indifferent, the absolute depth of winter, you possess an unbreakable internal capacity to live fiercely and joyfully. You have an invincible summer inside you that the external world just cannot touch.
Part 4. Modern Tools of Rebellion and Applying the Absurd.
So how do we actually apply all of this to our modern lives? How do we become the absurd hero when we're stuck in awful traffic, or doom scrolling through our phones, or dealing with a wildly stressful job? Well, first we have to stop living for the myth of arrival. This is that false, deeply ingrained idea that a new promotion, a new relationship, or a new car will somehow permanently cure our existential dread. Psychologists call this the hedonic treadmill. We think we'll arrive at happiness, but the feeling always fades, and we're right back where we started. We have to trade that myth of arrival for the joy of the climb itself.
You have to learn to set internal goals that are completely detached from external outcomes. Think of it like a mountain climber. A truly happy mountain climber uses the peak merely as an excuse to enjoy the act of climbing. Whether they actually reach the top or a bad storm turns them back, it doesn't matter because the real joy was in the process. You've got to find value in the daily process rather than obsessing over the end product. As Ben Thomas explores in his work, escaping the modern burnout trap means actively rebelling against the systems designed to numb us. It means rejecting the relentless digital noise of the attention economy that just tries to distract you from reality. It means separating what you can control from what you can't so you can stop suffering in your own imagination. And most importantly, it means you stop treating life like some math problem to be solved and start embracing your daily existence as a blank canvas for your very own meaning.
The reality is, the universe is never going to hand you a neatly packaged purpose. But by realizing that, you're actually granted the ultimate freedom. The total lack of cosmic meaning is exactly what makes you free to create your own meaning, right here, right now. So, knowing that the universe is entirely indifferent, how will you choose to push your boulder tomorrow morning? The choice, and that invincible summer, is entirely yours.
Have you ever been stuck in traffic? Sitting in that exact same gridlock you sit in every single Tuesday, just staring at the glowing red taillights of some crossover SUV in front of you.
Oh, yeah, we've all been there.
Right. Or perhaps you were at your desk looking at a spreadsheet you've updated 100 times, and suddenly the numbers just looked entirely alien.
Like they don't even mean anything anymore.
Exactly. Or, let's be honest, maybe you were lying awake at 3 a.m. staring at the ceiling fan, and out of nowhere you were struck by this paralyzing, overwhelming thought like, what is the actual point of all of this?
It is a really profound, jarring, and honestly terrifying moment of clarity, and it is completely universal.
Yeah, it really is.
Everyone, if they are paying even a little bit of attention to their lives, eventually hits that wall.
So if you're listening to this right now and you know exactly what that sudden drop in your stomach feels like, that cold sweat of realization that the script you've been handed might be completely blank, you are not crazy.
You definitely haven't broken down.
No, not at all. You have simply collided head-on with a philosophical phenomenon known as the absurd. And today we are going on a deep dive into the source material that unpacks exactly what that collision means.
And more importantly, how to actually survive it.
Yes. So our mission today is grounded in the insights of YouTuber Ben Thomas, who is known to a lot of people as Sisyphus55. We are zeroing in on his explorations of the philosophy of the absurd and modern rebellion.
Which is such a fascinating lens to view this through. We are going to be exploring the incredible, often painful tension between our deeply human search for meaning and, well, the silent, completely indifferent universe we live in.
And I want to set the stakes for you right here at the top. This isn't some abstract, dusty philosophical debate meant for a graduate seminar.
Right, it's not just theory.
Think of this as a practical, bare-knuckle survival guide for the 21st century.
We will be looking at how to take that existential dread, that acute modern burnout you might be feeling in the attention economy, and transform it into absolute liberation.
Which sounds like a tall order, but we're going to get there.
We are. To do that, we're synthesizing Albert Camus's concept of absurdism with the ancient principles of Stoicism. The ultimate goal here is to figure out how to live authentically, with your eyes wide open, when the world around you makes absolutely zero sense.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because to solve this crisis of meaning, we first have to understand the mechanics of how it actually sneaks up on us. I mean, we aren't walking around every day paralyzed by dread.
Right. Most of the time, we are operating in a state of assumed stability. We just coast.
We do.
We go through life relying on this stable, though largely illusory sense of reality. Think of the before world in your own life. You have your routines. You implicitly trust that society generally functions.
Yeah, you participate in commerce. You look forward to the weekend.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You have a set schedule that dictates when you sleep, eat, and work. The world, in this state, appears unchanged. It feels manageable because it operates on a predictable logic that you've just accepted without much scrutiny.
It's the daily grind. And it can be exhausting, sure, but it's a comfortable grind because you know the rules of the game. You know that if you put a coin in the machine, a soda comes out. If you put 40 hours in at the office, a paycheck comes out.
But then a disruption hits, and this disruption completely shatters that illusion of stability.
Just out of nowhere.
Seemingly in one innocent moment, your sense of reality is fundamentally corrupted. The way things worked before suddenly do not appear to make sense.
Yeah.
The coin goes into the machine, but nothing comes out.
And you suddenly realize you never actually knew how the machine worked in the first place.
Exactly. And reading through the sources, these disruptions aren't always apocalyptic.
Right, sometimes it's monumental, like a global pandemic. It completely rewrites the rules of society overnight, or a sudden layoff from a company you gave a decade of your life to, or a devastating breakup.
But other times, it's literally just a Tuesday.
Yeah. It's that cold sweat at 3 a.m. where the theater falls away, the stage lights turn on, and you realize everybody is just winging it. Nobody actually knows why we are here or where we are going or what the ultimate destination is supposed to be.
And when that illusion shatters, Sisyphus55 notes that we encounter a phenomenon called the chain of whys.
The chain of whys.
Yeah, this is the rapid, cascading dismantling of all our justifications for human action.
And the breakdown of this chain is so visceral. You wake up and your brain says, I need to go to work. And for the first time, a second voice says, why?
And you answer, to get money to buy clothes.
Why? So I can look presentable and impress my peers. Why? So I can find a partner and fall in love.
Why? So I can be happy.
But eventually you hit the very end of that chain and you ask the terminal question, why does any of it matter in the long run? And the chain just snaps.
It completely snaps. And suddenly, the physical weight of your toothbrush feels unbearable. The concept of eating breakfast appears completely alien and absurd.
Every moment of decision-making is suddenly met with dread because the foundational logic beneath the decisions has just evaporated.
You are experiencing the absurd. But it is vital that we define the mechanics of what Albert Camus actually meant by that term.
Right, because people use that word a lot.
In common parlance, people use the word absurd to mean silly, or they equate it with pure nihilism, the idea that the world itself is meaningless. But in a philosophical context, the absurd is something highly specific.
It isn't just a blank void of meaninglessness, it's a friction, right?
It is entirely about friction. For Camus, the absurd is the tension created by two conflicting forces crashing into one another.
Okay, what are the forces?
On one side, you have humanity. We possess a chronic, desperate, evolutionary urge to understand the world. Our brains are pattern recognition machines. We demand reason, we demand narrative, and we demand a purpose. We want the universe to answer our questions.
Then on the other side,
On the other side, you have the universe itself, which is silent, unreasonable, and completely indifferent to our demands.
if I could throw an analogy at this to really ground the mechanism, it feels like playing a highly structured video game, right?
Oh, I like that.
You've been playing for years. You've got quests. You've got a high score. You totally understand the rules of leveling up. But then suddenly there's a glitch.
The textures of the world just drop out.
Yeah. The non-player characters freeze. And you are suddenly just staring at cold, empty lines of raw code. You realize the game doesn't care about your score. It never cared. The code just exists.
That's a perfect way to visualize it.
But here is what I struggle with. If our human brains are literally wired by thousands of years of evolution to find patterns and seek meaning, isn't realizing that the universe doesn't care actually a recipe for madness? It feels like realizing the oxygen you were trying to breathe is actually a vacuum.
That psychological suffocation you're describing is the exact dread we feel when the chain of whys breaks.
So we are just meant to suffer.
Well, the absurd is not a problem you can solve like a math equation. It is a condition of existence. That tension between our desire for meaning and the universe's silence is unavoidable. However, and this is the crux of Camus's argument, realizing your life is a tragedy is not the end of the story.
It's not.
No, it is the required first step to actual liberation.
Okay, wait. How does recognizing the tragic futility of existence equate to liberation? Those seem like polar opposites.
We have to look at the mechanism of consciousness. Nothing becomes a tragedy until the hero is conscious of their circumstances.
Meaning what, exactly?
For people stuck in traffic who are blindly following the routine, who never ask why they're just functioning mechanically, they are asleep.
Right.
But the moment you ask why, the moment the textures drop out of the video game and you see the code, you become conscious of the absurd.
That awareness is a tragedy, yes, because it destroys your comforting illusions.
But it's a gateway. Yes, it is the only gateway to living truthfully. You are no longer sleepwalking. You have reclaimed your agency because you now see the board for what it actually is.
So, okay, I'm awake. I'm staring into the void of the indifferent universe, and I am hyper-conscious of the fact that the universe isn't going to hand me a purpose.
Yeah.
But faced with that terrifying, deafening silence, our immediate human instinct is to run and hide.
Absolutely. We want to fix the glitch and get the textures back.
We try to cure the absurd. But diving into Sisyphus 55's analysis, Camus argues that our typical human cures are actually poisons. They are false solutions that just dig us deeper into a hole of self-deception.
Faced with the incomprehensibility of existence, humanity has historically relied on a few major false solutions to try and resolve that painful tension you described.
To eliminate the friction.
Right. The instinct is to eliminate the friction by either changing the universe to fit our needs or destroying our own minds so we no longer feel the tension.
Let's explore the first major false solution. The sources describe it as the adoption of totalizing systems, or a system of denial.
Yes, and historically, the most prominent example of this has been religion. When faced with the terrifying, unreasonable fact that we live only to die in an indifferent universe, humanity constructed frameworks asserting that the universe isn't indifferent.
We are told our actions now dictate a reward or punishment in an afterlife.
Exactly, which neatly supplies our current life with a distinct, reasonable purpose. It takes the terrifying chaos and puts it into a neat moral spreadsheet.
And while Camus was addressing religion directly, Sisyphus 55 brilliantly points out that we do this in the secular modern age with equal fervor. We have replaced the afterlife with what we can call the myth of arrival.
The myth of arrival, that is such a crucial concept.
That's the belief that meaning is waiting for us just around the next corner, right?
It is the deeply ingrained societal narrative that if you just optimize your life enough, if you make a certain amount of money, if you reach a comfortable retirement, if you secure that specific vice president title at your firm, then everything will make sense.
You tell yourself that the anxiety will dissipate once you reach that financial or social plateau.
Yes, you are living for a mythical future where the tension of the absurd is finally resolved.
It's fascinating because whether the system is religious, financial, or social, the mechanism is the same. These totalizing systems exist to reduce the complexity of reality into something easily digestible. They give you a script.
They make the journey more comfortable.
But Camus argues they are a false solution because they require a sacrifice. You have to trade away your freedom.
You do. You tie your entire identity and your entire capacity for existential peace to fragile plans and future outcomes that are entirely out of your control.
Right, because life is unpredictable.
Exactly. If you are living your entire life for a financial myth of arrival, what happens when the macroeconomic environment shifts and the stock market crashes? What happens if your company downsizes and you lose that VP title?
Your existential peace completely shatters because it wasn't built on reality. It was built on an illusion that the universe operates according to your financial logic or your career plan.
You placed all your chips on a future that never arrived, and in doing so, you missed the actual present moment.
Which brings us to the second false solution humanity attempts. When we realize that totalizing systems of finance or society might be fragile, some philosophers pivot in a different direction. They suggest abandoning reason entirely.
This is where we get into thinkers like Søren Kierkegaard.
Yeah, and reading about his approach in the context of Camus is a wild contrast. Because Kierkegaard basically looked at the impossibility of understanding the universe and said, you're right, human reason can't grasp the meaning of life, so we have to stop trying to use reason.
He advocated for the leap of faith.
The idea is that you must accept the world as beyond your comprehension, but you choose to believe in a higher power or higher hidden reason anyway. You essentially surrender your intellect to the divine mystery.
And Camus vehemently rejects this. He views the leap of faith as intellectual self-obliteration. In Camus's philosophical framework, this is a form of philosophical suicide.
Because it destroys the tension by removing one of the opposing forces. If the absurd is the friction between human reason and a silent universe, Kierkegaard's solution is just to turn off human reason.
Precisely the mechanism at play. For Camus, our ability to reason, to observe, to demand clarity, this is our defining, most vital human trait.
To surrender that is just giving up.
Right. To surrender our reason just to find emotional comfort is to surrender the very tool we need to engage with life authentically. We may never be successful in forcing the universe to make sense to our reason, but the struggle of doing so is what gives us our dignity.
When you take a leap of faith, you are choosing blindness over a painful truth.
It's putting on a blindfold because you don't like the landscape.
Which leaves us with a third historical solution to the absurd. If we refuse to adopt a totalizing system to trick ourselves into thinking there is meaning, and we refuse to commit philosophical suicide by throwing our reason out the window, some people conclude there is only one logical endpoint.
Literal self-obliteration. Suicide.
Right. If the tension is too painful, you destroy the physical self to escape the futility.
Camus dedicates immense energy to exploring this exact question. He asks if suicide is a legitimate, reasonable solution to the absurd, and he concludes that it is not. In fact, it is the ultimate failure to confront the absurd.
Walk me through the mechanics of that, because on a surface level, to someone drowning in existential dread, removing yourself from the equation might seem like a rational solution to an unsolvable problem. Why does Camus argue it fails?
Because suicide does not solve the absurd. It merely eliminates one of the terms of the equation. Remember, the absurd requires both the universe and the conscious human mind observing it.
So you're just taking yourself off the board.
By extinguishing your own consciousness, you aren't rebelling against the absurd. You are capitulating to it. You are confessing that life is too much trouble, that the universe has defeated you.
I see.
Camus argues that the absurd is a condition that must be lived through, observed, and challenged. Suicide is a rejection of freedom itself, because freedom requires a conscious mind to experience it.
To bring back my earlier analogy of walking through a chaotic, incredibly noisy city, the first two solutions, clinging to a totalizing career plan or taking a religious leap of faith, it's like putting on noise-canceling headphones and blasting a guided meditation while you walk through the chaos.
That's a great image.
It feels peaceful, sure, but you are operating on a complete delusion. You're eventually going to step into an open manhole because you aren't engaging with the reality of your environment.
And the third solution, suicide, is just refusing to walk at all. You just lay down in traffic.
Exactly. But this leaves us in a really tight corner. If we can't pretend there is meaning, we can't throw away our intellect, and we can't just quit the game entirely. What on earth is the actual option? How do we live with this tension without losing our minds?
This brings us to the core of our deep dive. The true solution to the absurd is that we must embrace the chaos without ever surrendering to it. We must hold the tension.
Okay.
And to illustrate how a human being actually does this, Camus introduces us to the ultimate absurd hero, Sisyphus.
Yes, the myth of Sisyphus. Now, anyone who has taken a cursory glance at Greek mythology or philosophy knows the basic setup here.
Right, the guy with the rock.
Sisyphus angered the gods, and as a punishment, he was condemned to an eternity of rolling a massive boulder up a mountain, and every single time he gets it near the very peak, the sheer weight of the rock overpowers him, and it rolls all the way back down to the valley.
He has to trudge back down and start the process over.
Forever. It is the purest distillation of futile, meaningless labor.
Sisyphus 55 uses this myth because it maps so flawlessly onto the modern condition. We don't need to look at ancient Greece to find Sisyphus, we just need to look at the modern commute.
Right. Waking up, sitting in traffic, sitting in a cubicle, answering emails, driving home, eating, sleeping, and doing it all over again the next day.
Endlessly pushing a corporate boulder up a hill day after day, year after year, with no ultimate cosmic reward waiting at the end.
But then Camus drops what might be one of the most famous and initially baffling lines in 20th century philosophy.
Yeah.
One must imagine Sisyphus happy.
It's a shocking statement.
When you first hear that, it sounds insane. The man is in eternal torment. How could he possibly be happy?
Camus outlines 3 specific absurdist mindsets that Sisyphus adopts, which allow him to master his fate and completely invert the god's punishment. The first mindset is constant revolution, or what Camus calls permanent revolt.
So what does permanent revolt look like when you're pushing a rock? He's not organizing a labor strike against the gods.
No, the revolt is entirely internal and perceptual. Sisyphus has absolutely no illusions about his existence. He knows it is futile. He knows the rock will fall.
But he pushes it anyway.
He revolts against his circumstances by giving his absolute, undivided attention and energy to a task he knows he will never finish. By embracing the unreasonableness of a situation with total lucidity, with his eyes wide open, he rebels against the despair the gods intended for him.
So the gods wanted to break his spirit through futility.
Right. By refusing to be broken, by owning his labor, he asserts his own agency.
He's looking the indifferent universe dead in the eye and saying, I see exactly what you are, and I'm going to push this rock anyway. And the second mindset Sisyphus adopts.
Rejecting eternal freedom, which essentially means dropping hope. Now, that sounds incredibly bleak to modern ears. We are conditioned to believe hope is a virtue. But in the absurdist framework, hope is a poison.
Why is hope a poison? Because it ties back to the myth of arrival.
Exactly. Hope defers your life to the future. If Sisyphus spends his time pushing the rock while hoping that one day the gods will forgive him, or hoping that the rock will magically stay at the top, he is not living in reality.
He is suffering because his mind is in a fictitious future.
Yes. By dropping hope, he discounts the illusion of salvation. He recognizes that heaven is on earth, and that his entire existence, his entire freedom, is located exclusively in the present moment, right here, right now, with this rock.
Which naturally leads to the third mindset Sisyphus embodies, a passion for life. Sisyphus 55 explains that Camus recommends living as much as possible, rather than living as good as possible.
It is a philosophy of quantity and intensity of experience.
It's about feeling the rough texture of the rock, the burn in your muscles, the sweat on your brow, feeling the pleasure and the pain completely, taking in the full spectrum of the experience, because it is literally the only experience you are ever going to get.
There is a profound quote from the sources that illustrates this synthesis beautifully. Camus writes, "Each atom of that stone, each mineral flake of that night-filled mountain in itself forms a world. The struggle itself towards the heights is enough to fill a man's heart."
Wow.
Sisyphus is the ultimate rebel because he finds joy despite the punishment. He doesn't need the rock to reach the top to find meaning. The act of pushing, the sheer defiance of living, becomes its own self-generated meaning.
Okay, I love the poetry of that. It is deeply moving as a piece of literature. But I have to push back here on behalf of the listener who is sitting in their cubicle right now, looking at an inbox that is overflowing. Let's hear it. It is really easy to say Sisyphus is happy in a philosophical essay. It's easy to romanticize pushing a boulder. But if my boulder is answering 500 emails for a middle manager who absolutely does not care about my existence, in a corporation that is actively exploiting my labor to maximize shareholder value, how do I actually find joy in that?
Right.
How is typing emails a form of freedom or revolt? I feel like if I just smile, drop hope, and type the emails, I am not being an absurd hero. I am just being a highly compliant, totally broken corporate drone.
That is the vital, necessary question. If we stop at Camus, we might be left with a beautiful theory that is incredibly difficult to execute in a modern office environment.
So how do we apply it?
How do we operationalize this philosophy so it doesn't just become a sophisticated coping mechanism for late-stage capitalism? To answer that, we have to look at how Sisyphus 55 beautifully merges Camus's absurdism with the ancient principles of Stoicism.
Okay, Stoicism.
Because while Camus gives us the mindset of rebellion, the demand for lucidity Stoicism gives us the tools for internal emotional control.
We need to find a way to access what Camus called our invincible summer. He wrote that in the depth of winter, he finally learned that within him there lay an invincible summer.
It's this internal architecture that allows you to be happy even in the absolute desert of existence.
But how do we actually build that architecture when we are drowning in mundane, seemingly meaningless tasks?
We turn to the Stoics thinkers like Epictetus, Marcus Aurelius, and Seneca. The absolute chief task in Stoic life, the foundational operating system, is the dichotomy of control.
Which is separating what we control from what we don't.
It is the rigorous, constant practice of separating what is under our control from what is not. We cannot control the indifferent universe. We cannot control the macroeconomy. We cannot control the fact that the absurd exists or that your boss demands those 500 emails by 5:00 p.m. Those are external conditions.
And we can entirely, utterly control our internal response to them.
Yes. So the battleground isn't the office. The battleground is the internal landscape. Seneca famously stated, "We suffer more often in imagination than in reality."
Wait, think about the mechanics of your dread when you open that inbox. The actual physical reality of your present moment is just your fingers pressing plastic keys on a keyboard in a climate-controlled room. It is entirely neutral.
Exactly. It's completely neutral. So where does the suffering come from?
From the story we tell ourselves about it.
The suffering comes entirely from your imagination. You are suffering because you are mourning the freedom you wish you had, you are resenting the manager who sent the emails, or you are dreading the exhaustion you will feel when you finish.
You are layering a narrative of oppression over a neutral physical act.
Your resistance to the reality of the present moment is what causes the pain, not the emails themselves.
I understand the mechanism you are describing, but how do I change my internal response so that answering the emails actually becomes my boulder that I push with joy? How do I prevent this from just being a psychological trick to make me a better worker bee?
By setting internal goals that are completely, radically detached from external outcomes. Sisyphus 55 provides a brilliant example of this distinction. The mountain climber.
Okay, let's analyze a happy mountain climber.
They do not climb solely to reach the summit. Why? Because the summit is an external outcome they cannot entirely control. A blizzard could roll in, they could twist an ankle, their equipment could fail.
And even if they do reach the peak, the goal instantly evaporates the moment they stand on it. The joy of the summit is fleeting and fragile.
So if the summit doesn't matter, why spend weeks freezing on the side of a mountain?
Right. Why do it?
Because they use the peak merely as an excuse to go climbing. The goal is the act of climbing itself. The goal is the focus required to place the piton, the physical endurance, the mastery over their own fear.
Oh. Okay, that completely recontextualizes Sisyphus.
Yeah.
The boulder isn't a punishment. The boulder is just his excuse to push.
Exactly.
He doesn't care about getting it to the top, because getting to the top isn't the point. Activating his own strength, his own defiance, is the point.
Precisely. If you set goals detached from outcomes, the absurd cannot hurt you, because you are focused entirely on the journey, the process, rather than the meaningless destination. Let's apply this to your 500 emails.
Please do.
If your internal goal is, I must finish these 500 emails so my boss praises me, and I get a promotion, and I achieve the myth of arrival, you are setting yourself up for catastrophic existential dread. You don't control the promotion, the company could go bankrupt, and the praise might never come.
And even if it does come, it won't fulfill me the way I think it will.
Right. But if you change the framework, if your internal goal is, I am going to practice absolute focus, diligence, and clarity in my communication for the next hour. I am going to master my own attention.
Then the emails are no longer an oppressive task imposed by a boss.
They are simply the excuse for you to practice your own internal virtues. You have internalized the locus of control. The boss isn't making you do anything. You are using the environment the boss provided as a gymnasium to strengthen your own mind.
Wow, that completely flips the script. You strip the external world of its power to dictate your emotional state. You aren't complying, you are utilizing. But let's bring this fully into the reality of the 21st century.
Let's do it.
Because today, the gods aren't punishing us on a literal mountain in ancient Greece. They are punishing us through algorithms, digital platforms, and corporate ladders. How do we push our boulders with joy in a world that is actively engineered to distract us.
To do that, we have to recognize the highly specific, unique ways modern society creates psychological suffering. We aren't just dealing with the existential absurd anymore, we're dealing with a manufactured, highly profitable absurd.
What do you mean by that?
We are trapped in an attention economy, and we are subjected to what the philosopher Byung-Chul Han calls neoliberal auto-exploitation.
Let's break that down, because Byung-Chul Han's theories are critical here. Auto-exploitation, meaning we exploit ourselves. How does neoliberalism factor into this?
In traditional disciplinary societies, think of the factories of the 19th and 20th centuries. You had an external boss, right? An overseer who forced you to work. You were exploited by an external force.
Someone standing over you with a clipboard.
Exactly. But Han argues that in our modern neoliberal achievement society, the system has evolved. We no longer need an external boss with a whip.
Because the logic of capitalism and relentless optimization has been installed directly into our own minds.
Yes. We treat ourselves as personal projects that must be endlessly optimized, branded, and monetized.
We act as both the oppressive manager and the exhausted worker simultaneously. We track our sleep cycles to optimize our weekend productivity. We turn our weekend hobbies into side hustles, because if we aren't monetizing our joy, we feel like we are wasting time.
It's exhausting.
We constantly curate our personal brands on LinkedIn and Instagram, comparing our chaotic behind-the-scenes lives to everyone else's perfectly filtered highlight reels.
And in this environment of constant self-surveillance and optimization, the smartphone becomes the ultimate tool of control. Han refers to the smartphone as a digital devotional object.
A digital devotional object.
It is our modern confessional booth. We pour our data, our desires, and our insecurities into it, and it keeps us on a relentless hedonic treadmill of comparison and distraction.
It's a slot machine in our pocket, engineered by some of the smartest behavioral psychologists in the world, designed to hijack our dopamine receptors.
Precisely.
And earlier, we talked about distraction as one of those false solutions to the absurd. When we are constantly scrolling through short-form video feeds, we are just putting on those noise-canceling headphones again. We are desperately avoiding sitting quietly with ourselves.
We are terrified of the silence of the universe, so we drown it out with an endless stream of digital noise. Distraction is the modern leap of faith.
You surrender your attention, which is your most valuable cognitive resource, to an algorithm, just to avoid facing the reality of your own existence.
So the critical question becomes, how do we genuinely rebel in this specific environment? If the system profits from our distraction and our endless pursuit of optimized external outcomes, how do we revolt?
By practicing what the sources call reflective autonomy and intentional creation. And the psychological framework for this, the actual weapon we use to fight back, is cultivating the state of flow.
Flow is the antidote to the attention economy.
Coined by psychologist Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, right?
Yes, flow is the psychological state of absolute total immersion in an activity. It occurs when an activity is challenging enough to require your full undivided attention, but perfectly matches your current skill level so you aren't overwhelmed by anxiety or bored by ease.
Sisyphus 55 looks to ancient Chinese philosophy, specifically Taoism, to brilliantly illustrate this concept in action. He brings up the story of Cook Ding.
The story of Cook Ding is perhaps one of the greatest parables of autotelic action done for its own sake. Cook Ding was a butcher for Lord Wenhai.
Okay, so he's a butcher.
But he wasn't just doing a job. He found immense satisfaction, beauty, and spontaneity in the simple, bloody, everyday act of cutting meat.
The story notes that while an average cook would have to change his knife every month because he hacked and chopped at the meat, and a good cook had to change his knife every year because he simply cut, Cook Ding had been using the exact same knife for 19 years.
After carving thousands of oxen, his blade was as sharp as the day it came off the whetstone.
Which seems impossible. How does a butcher not dull a blade after 19 years of hitting bone?
Because Cook Ding didn't hit the bone. He paid such profound microscopic attention to the present moment, he was so deeply immersed in the state of flow, that he could perceive the natural gaps in the joints.
Oh, wow.
He didn't force his way through the animal. He slipped his impossibly thin blade through the empty spaces between the bones. He moved with the natural grain of reality, not against it.
By being completely, totally immersed in the simple physical activity that made up his everyday life, he found profound satisfaction. He turned a slaughterhouse into a canvas for mastery.
It's trained spontaneity. It is finding the sublime in the mundane. And this is where the synthesis of all these ideas really peaks. Flow is the exact psychological space where meaning-making and sense-making unite.
By engaging in these autotelic activities done purely for the joy of doing them, like the mountain climber ascending the peak, or Cook Dean slicing the ox, or Sisyphus leaning his shoulder against the rock, we completely short-circuit the neoliberal optimization trap.
We escape what is sometimes called the bureaucrat funnel and the endless rat race. When you are in flow, you step entirely out of the future-obsessed, outcome-driven mindset.
You are no longer exploiting yourself for a future reward.
You fully, deeply inhabit the present moment. You become invincible to the absurd because the tension dissolves when your entire consciousness is engaged in the immediate act of creation or focus.
Okay, I am with you on the theory. But I want to push back one final time because we promised a practical survival guide. Putting down my smartphone for an hour, going for a run without tracking my pace on a smartwatch, or deeply focusing on chopping vegetables for dinner. On a macro scale, it doesn't exactly feel like a radical, system-smashing rebellion against a dystopian society.
I hear that.
It feels like a nice weekend hobby. It feels incredibly small.
It may seem small on the surface, but you must consider the context of the battlefield you are on. You live in a world backed by trillion-dollar industries that are specifically, scientifically designed to harvest your attention, to make you feel fundamentally inadequate, and to sell you false, totalizing systems of meaning to cure the insecurity they created.
In that environment, your attention is the most highly contested resource on the planet.
They need my attention to fuel the machine. Exactly. So in that context, reclaiming your own mind, choosing where to place your focus, is the most radical act available to you.
Because it disrupts their business model.
Finding intrinsic, quiet joy in the present moment without monetizing it, without optimizing it, and without posting it on a platform for external validation is the ultimate act of permanent revolt. You are starving the system of the anxiety and distraction it needs to survive.
You are choosing to be awake.
As Sisyphus 55 beautifully reminds us, you are a localized piece of the universe, and through your conscious, focused action, you are the universe making sense of itself.
That is incredibly powerful. To choose to just be with total lucidity, without needing a cosmic reason or a financial reward, is the rebellion.
It really is.
So let's bring this all together for you listening right now. That drop in your stomach, that existential dread you felt in traffic or at 3 a.m., it is not a glitch in your brain. It is not a disease you need to medicate away with endless scrolling.
It is an awakening.
It is you finally colliding with the reality of the absurd. You cannot solve this tension by burying yourself in a frantic pursuit of wealth, by adopting rigid dogmas, or by numbing yourself with digital distraction.
Those are false cures that require you to sacrifice your freedom and your reason.
But by merging the total, unflinching lucidity of Sisyphus, embracing the struggle without hope of a magical rescue with the internal emotional control of the Stoics, you can actually build your own invincible summer.
You can find flow in the everyday, mundane tasks of your life, knowing that mastering your own mind in the present moment is the entire point of the exercise.
And as we conclude our deep dive today, I want to leave you with one final lingering idea to chew on as you go back to your day.
If we accept Camus's premise that meaning isn't handed down to us from above by the gods, and it isn't waiting for us at the end of a career ladder, but is generated strictly by the friction of our own conscious struggle, what if the very obstacles in your life that you resent the most are actually the raw materials you need to build your identity?
Oh, wow. That flips the whole paradigm.
What if you looked at your current frustrating boulder? Whether that is a difficult, demanding job, a period of deep uncertainty in your life, or just the exhausting daily grind of modern existence, not as a curse imposed upon you, but as your canvas.
What if the weight of the rock is exactly what you need to prove your own strength?
Your boulder is your canvas.
That is an incredible reframing. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the philosophy of the absurd and modern rebellion. We hope it gave you some practical tools to reclaim your attention and your freedom. So the next time you find yourself stuck in that gridlock traffic, staring at those red taillights, don't panic. Don't reach for the phone to numb the silence. Just take a deep breath. Observe the absurdity of it all. Step back into the reality of the world and push your boulder with a smile.